We pull up our agenda. I mean, who's the chair to the vice chair to the vice chair? Like,
We don't have a vice chair
So
for
I
this
think-
position. I could call the meeting to order if that would be of help. Are you ready? Okay, all right, I call this meeting to order. I'm Counselor Vanessa Nordyke. Other counselors present are
Jay Matthews, Paul Tigan, Ward 1.
and online.
Linda Nishioka, though I'm not part of the committee, I attend the meetings.
Okay, we have several members of staff present. Welcome, city manager. Welcome all. This is the finance committee set for February 17th at 4 p.m. And after our call to order, first item on our agenda is approval of the December 15 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Here comes Counselor.
No opposed. Okay, moving on. Is there anyone here for public comment today? Welcome.
Meeting is here.
See, no one is lined up for public comment, so we'll give our chair a moment to.
Treat of that.
Are you going?
I was having technical difficulties. Printing, so we only have agenda and stuff like that. That's why I'm late. I'm trying to print at my office. Can you do it on the physical agenda? Or I cannot incline. No, that's okay. I'll pay attention. I review the material. I thought you could. No.
You can also look over my shoulder. So here's the agenda. So we just moved to approve the minutes unanimously. There was no one signed up for public comment. There were no action items. So item number 5A, management update / information items. We have the REDW presentation.
Thank you, Counselor. So we're going to turn over to Ryan Pascarella with REDW, who's going to present the audit.
Yeah, I was gonna say things first.
Oh,
and then-
sorry, go ahead, Jeremy.
Jeremy Morgan, financial reporting manager in the finance department. I'm pleased to let everyone know that the fiscal year 25 audits are complete and the financial reports have been published. So you have the electronic paper copy. So just have a quick rundown before Ryan. The Urban Renewal Agency annual report was completed on time by the standard December 31st deadline. We ran into a few issues with the city annual comprehensive financial report. We were able to get an extension from the state and issued that by their extension January 31st. Those had a unmodified opinion, so basically clean audit, which Ryan will talk a little bit more about. Single audit is also done. I think that's a copy of the single audit right there. That one also done, published. We did have one finding under that audit. There was kind of a public kind of a transparency reporting requirement for those. So going into a little bit technical detail. So it's federal funding, accounting and what is it? I forget the basically something Transparency Act. So we are required to, when we are the first recipient of federal grants, when we push on money to subcontracts for civil works that are over $50,000, those go to it's basically a federal portal, web portal. We did not do that in a timely manner, so that was the finding there. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So basically what overview.
Thanks, Jeremy. Go ahead, Ryan.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy, for that. And yes, I was sitting here silent knowing that Jeremy was going to talk before me. I was like, come on, Jeremy. Come on, Jeremy. Here we go. Anyway, my name is Ryan Pascarella. As they said, I work for REDW. We're a firm of about 350 CPAs, and we're in 4 different cities really at this point. I am in Salem, Oregon. I used to be part of Grove, Mueller, and Swank, and we merged in with REDW. So now everything you see says REDW all over it at this point. I am here to talk just briefly about the audit for June 30, 2025. And here we go. And I'll pop some slides up here for you. So I hope that you can see those slides at this point.
We can.
Looks good.
Perfect. There we go. Okay, so the audit really is multiple audits that we end up doing for this. And really, there is the city audit. Jeremy mentioned Urban Renewal Agency audit. There is also the Salem Convention Center audit that rolls up into the URA. And then there's the federal compliance audit that is also done annually for you at this point. So here's the list of most of the people that worked on the engagement. Larry Grant and I are principals. Larry goes through and does a concurring review over the work that I've done just as part of our quality control processes. Toby Roth is our senior manager. He is basically in charge of the day-to-day on the audit, and he's the primary communicator with Jeremy and the finance team as we work through everything. And then we had a whole bunch of people working on different areas of it, just because there is so much related to your audit. So that's roughly the team. I'm sure there's a few other people, but that's all right. I am required under auditing standards to communicate with those charged with governance, in this case, the finance committee, just certain things related to the audit itself, and really have a direct conversation with the finance committee as part of wrapping up the audit. That way, it isn't everything you hear about the audit is coming through management or anything. You need to hear directly from us. So basically, some of the things we covered at the very beginning of the audit, we had a meeting and kind of talked about what the audit was going to look like, kind of where we felt like we needed to focus our time. And that happened the meeting itself happened in September, but there was a few other communications that happened in there that really just talked about what we felt were risks and stuff related to it. I will talk a little bit about the accounting policies of the city, some pretty significant estimates that the city has. And then if there's any disclosures, and then the finding, obviously, that Jeremy already briefly mentioned. So status, as Jeremy said, audit is completed. All 4 audits are completed at this point. Salem Convention Center was done first, then URA was done by the end of December. And then January, the ACFR was issued. And as part of that, at the same time as the ACFR, the federal compliance report was also issued. So our audit was done in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, which is basically just, covers the US essentially. And it also was done under government auditing standards and uniform guidance. And those really relate to the federal compliance work. And it brings in some other reporting things that you're going to see in those documents. What is the goal of my audit? Basically, to get an unmodified opinion, a clean opinion. And what that means is we're giving reasonable assurance that there are no material errors within the financial statements. That could be incorrect numbers that are material, or like missing disclosures in your financial statements that need to be in there. Like you said, you received an unmodified opinion on all 3 of those audits at this point. So that's what we're looking for, more than anything else. So there were no real changes in what we ended up doing for the audit from the beginning to the end. We kind of know what your estimates are. City's pretty consistent year over year, kind of on the activity. Yeah, there are, ebbs and flows to an extent, but a lot of it was just, we're able to work through our original audit plan, which really allows us to keep the process going forward well. Management, as always, provided all the information to us that we needed, and they did it pretty much on a timely basis. And I say pretty much because there was that month extension that was asked for, and I'll talk about that a little bit. And as always, the city has done a very good job of, just communicating with us, being ready for us, and really helping us get through the audit. So definitely appreciate that one. Part of the audit is we always go through your accounting policies to make sure they follow generally accepted accounting principles. There was really only one new accounting pronouncement that came out this year that we ended up implementing. And so that got added to the notes to the financial statements in the ACFR there. And the new accounting policy relates to the new Government Accounting Standards Board 101, which relates to compensated absences. And really what that is expanded what the definition of compensated absences is in your financial statements. And basically what the city had to do was figure out roughly how much sick time that employees are going to use prior to leaving their employment with the city. And that is all kinds of a fun process to figure that one out. You can ask Jeremy about it. There was some back and forth with implementing that pronouncement in there. Part of it was making sure that we did a beginning of the year adjustment to that because it could impact the beginning and end of the year. Basically, that's what took a little bit of extra time during the audit itself. The back and forth, making sure that's correct, making sure the new footnote information in there is correct. But that all got hashed out. Other than that, there were no real changes in your accounting policies during the year. Here's a list of few estimates. I put compensated absences at the bottom of it, but I can only give reasonable assurance that there are no material errors because estimates play a huge role in your financial statements. I mean, if you want to look at, your capital assets and how long you'll be able to use them, your net pension liability related to the PERS, amount. You've got OPEB, you're self-insured, and then there's leases and all kinds of stuff in there. So lots of things that the city goes through. They determine what the estimate is and how to, value it essentially. And as part of the audit, we go through and make sure that it's reasonable how that is being done. And those, like I said, are in the accounting policies. It lays them out a little bit for you. There you go. We also report on whether there were any significant adjustments that we requested to your numbers during the year. And there were some adjustments done after we got the preliminary numbers, but that was all related to getting some areas finished up. Best one to talk about is compensated absences, because that wasn't really ready until December. And so we had to move or add that to our numbers essentially, but that was just the finance team working through things, getting it done. I don't consider it to be an adjustment that I recommended because it was the city just doing it essentially. So we said there were no material corrected misstatements. There were also no adjustments that we recommended that the city decided not to post. And so basically the numbers that we got, they were clean. We didn't ask for any changes to the numbers. We didn't see any material errors with the numbers that were in there. And so that, yet again, just kind of helps us get through the audit a little quicker. And I appreciate that one. As part of the government auditing standards and just auditing standards in general, we are required to report any significant or material problems that we see with your internal controls. As it relates to like financial reporting in there. And so this is really how you're documenting things within the city, who's reviewing things, are those reviews documented? Do we feel like the correct information is being put into the system and carried all the way through? So we look at your systems every year, how you collect money, how you spend money, your payroll process, everything essentially where money is coming in or out. In there. And so yet again, this year, there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that we had noted. Sometimes there are recommendations we have, and we just talk with management about those recommendations because they're not significant. It's more like, this is what we see, best practices kind of thing.
Hey, Ryan.
Yes.
This is Paul Tagan, one of the counselors. Can I stop you for a question?
Yes, absolutely.
So if you go back a slide or two, just in terms of some of the, not this one, but the one before that, where you listed out the portions where there's accounting estimates.
Yep.
I'm curious how you go about determining the reasonability of the city's approach in bringing in estimates for PERS liability, self-insurance liability. What's your basis for determining whether the city's approach is reasonable?
Well, with the net pension liability, the unfunded portion of PERS essentially is what that is. That is actually determined at the state level. The state gets an audit, PERS gets an audit, and then they also work with Milliman, which is an actuarial firm, to determine what that liability is. And so annually, there is information that is provided to all of the auditing firms and honestly to the city and stuff about what the city's portion of that net pension liability is. So it's not that I need to determine that because I would have no clue how to determine that.
Right.
So we're really relying on, some very, very qualified actuaries to help create those numbers for us. And then with your self-insurance, it's really, historical how it's been and what claims you've had like after the end of the year that related to the year in question, and really just making sure that it's reasonable. That liability isn't as large as some liabilities on your books. It's not as, I'll say, material as far as a dollar amount as some of the other liabilities in there. And so really we're pretty comfortable with looking at it based on the collections and the history of it more than anything else. Does that
Thank
work?
you.
Yep.
Yep, appreciate that.
Yeah, and please don't ask me to tell you how that net pension liability thing is officially done. It's a fun one. All right, go back up here and then, I didn't hear Jeremy say this one. So we also look at Oregon minimum standards, compliance with Oregon administrative rules, essentially is what it is. And so on the right, just a list of the things that could be applicable. They're not applicable to every governmental entity in Oregon, but a lot of them are. And so here's a list of the ones that really, do apply for the most part for the city in there. So we look at these annually. We look at your procurement records to make sure that we're comfortable that you're getting the bids that you need related to them and documenting things well. We're looking at the budgeting process to make sure you're having all the meetings you're supposed to, the timing of, putting out the publications for those meetings is correct, the correct information is in there, all kinds of stuff like that. And we did that for the city and for the URA. So the city, we did not find anything that was considered to be material non-compliance, as our rules state, is what we say. And then the URA, there was one issue with the budget document itself not matching the resolution, or you could say the resolution not matching the budget document. So that was just an error on one side or the other. Jeremy can elaborate some, but we just disclosed that, making sure it gets fixed for the next time you're doing your budget cycle for them. Did you want to say something on that, Jeremy, before I move on? Or are you good?
I mean, I'll say something.
Okay.
Hallie Leinenbach, budget manager here. Yes, thank you for finding that. We are bringing a report to council to do a supplemental budget to correct and match those things together, the budget book and the detail there, as well as the resolution. So that should be coming to the URA board on the 23rd.
How big of a difference was it?
It was, the totals remained the same. So the totals were correct. It was just the categories that showed up in the resolution. It was in a different category in the resolution versus the budget. So that was our error.
Sounds pretty minor since the totals were still the same.
Yeah.
Could have been worse.
Still an error, so apologies for that, but thankfully the auditors found it and we'll get it corrected. That's why we did it.
Well, and it's proof that this works.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we do deem that to be substantial, because basically it means that you were spending money at a category level that you hadn't appropriated. And so it's important to get that fixed. I'm pretty sure that, citizens would want that to be the correct amount essentially in there. No real repercussions coming from the state or anything like that. It's just, let's make sure we get it fixed and move forward with it more than anything else. Yeah. And then the other thing was in here, the federal compliance audit that was done. So we looked at two programs this year, CDBG and then the home program. Both of those are directly funded from HUD in there. And so we looked at those. Basically, there's a process to determine what federal funds we audit year over year. Sometimes we don't have to audit one in a year because we looked at it in the prior year. We always take into account risk essentially in there, but these two popped up as high risk essentially for 25. So we looked at both of those. The one finding that we had related to it, Jeremy briefly mentioned, and it relates to reporting. the FFATA Reporting Requirement Transparency Act. So there were 5, I guess, sub-recipient contracts that the city had that should have been entered into this federal database, essentially, just for transparency of how the money is being spent. And that's because the city received the money directly from the federal government, and then they passed it through in a sub-recipient relationship, and somebody other than the city was actually running the program itself. So there were 5 that were done, they were not reported. So this is just kind of a summary of the dollar amount that we're talking about here. One important thing that I have written in here, we did not report any question costs related to this finding. Question cost basically means we don't know if that money was spent correctly or not. And that's how we report to the federal government. We don't feel that there were any question costs. This was just a lack of reporting that should have been done related to it. The money was spent the way it was supposed to in accordance with the CDBG program. So that's a very important distinction. Not all findings are the same severity, I guess, I'll put it that way. And this is a more minor one. And honestly, this is a very, very common finding because there was not real good communication from the federal government to everybody about this. And a lot of people aren't even aware that this federal website exists and things should be put in there. So we did write it up, and the city is definitely aware of it now. And I'm assuming catching that reporting up in there as necessary. Okay. Questions on that?
Just for context, there were 5 findings. How many potential findings are there? Kind of numbers?
So there were 5 sub-awards that were not reported to this website, and just to be really clear, Ryan's correct, we were unaware of this requirement, and it's not a new requirement, so it's been something the city has not done for quite a while because we weren't aware it was that we were supposed to be doing it. So it's something we'll be doing going forward, but 5 of our sub-awards that are considered a tier 1. Is that right, Jeremy?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
So what's a tier 1?
That's a really good question.
It means that you received the money directly from the federal government. That's kind of their term for it. And then you were passed the money on to another organization as a subrecipient, but you're basically the tier 1 person on it. From what I know.
So how many?
And it is one finding. It just happened to be 5 different sub-awards that it impacted, but it was written up just as one finding. And you will see that in more detail. There's a federal compliance report that was provided to you. The back pages of that are the city's corrective action plan related to it. But then just before that, it goes into more detail about the finding and the requirements and all of that as well.
5 sub-awards looks like a total of 868,000 transactions.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And then other than that, there's just some other general things to kind of mention. Like I said, there was no significant changes in how we approach the audit. Nothing large popped up during the audit that made us pivot on what we needed to do for the engagement. And part of that's just good communication with the city as we get into the audit, making sure that we're going the correct direction with it. No other matters related to financial reporting. I kind of mentioned the compensated absences change and kind of what happened there. No, we didn't use any other outside auditors or anything for what we're doing here. Yes, we did rely on the PERS auditors for it, but we didn't contract with anybody for the work that's being done here or anything like that. And then there were, like I said, no significant changes in what happened during the audit itself. Okay, no consultants. See, no disagreements with management, no difficulties really came up during the audit or anything. It took a little bit of time, but it's a big audit, obviously. But we were able to work through it, and Jeremy and his team helped out tremendously. There is a representation letter that is provided to us from management, and basically it says that they've provided us all the information material to the audit. They provided us, if there's any significant litigation going on that we are aware of it, whatever it would be that would potentially cause the financial statements to be materially incorrect. And that, I mean, that's kind of what I've got here. No real difficulties or anything. Questions, other questions, anything?
Ryan, this is Paul again. You know, I'll be honest that in my professional experience, don't spend a lot of time with auditors. And so I feel like it's good to get an audit back that has very little to report in terms of problems. But I'm sorry, we communicate to our residents that you know, I think it's been kind of a perennial, or maybe every other couple of years, like, hey, we need like auditors on staff. Like, this is a really important function. And I think our response has been, well, we do have auditors. It's this process that we're talking about today. So I'm just kind of making that observation, and I'm curious, you don't need to name names, but like, what are other kinds of problems you see cities run into that do come up in their audit that you didn't see come up in this one? Like, I'm curious what kind of things, if a city's in a rough spot, you would see that today we have this, you know, I don't know, so this reporting requirement for the federal government is the only thing that came up. Like, what other things could come up that, you know, looked good to you?
Well, what things that come up on other engagements at this point really relate to what's happening within, I'll just say, the city at this particular point. A lot of the times there are significant issues with the information being provided to the auditors and really finalizing your numbers for the year. A lot of that has to do with the inexperience of the staff that are in there. We spend a lot of time with some clients just kind of working through that. We see quite a bit of the time where the program staff aren't as familiar with the program as they should be, whether that be from turnover or what. And we end up with quite a few findings about the documentation of things. A good example of that is when you have federal funding, there are very specific rules that the federal government wants you to be documenting as it relates to your conflict of interest, making sure you have policies related to that, and some other things like that. Clients miss that a lot because they're just not familiar enough with the process in there. Main thing is the more that the city, your city, any city can keep a consistent team and have documented processes, most of the time you're not going to find any significant issues. I mean, there could be some timing issues and some help needed, but as long as that's there and somebody else can step in and start doing it, you're going to be a long ways down the line, I guess, with it. We do quite often actually report the question costs that I, communicated to you, because lack of good documentation of what's really happening within different departments. With a city like Salem, you're pretty darn decentralized. I mean, not everything is really running through, I'll say, the finance department. Yes, you have your AP and all of that stuff in there, but there's a lot of program specific stuff that is sitting out in the department level. That gets pretty messed up sometimes in some organizations. So it's definitely a good idea to make sure those things are documented in there. Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yeah, let me just see if I reflect back what I'm hearing. So what you're saying is that kind of at the outset, what your team experiences working with Salem is that the relative level of professionalism and experience that the team brings ends up addressing a lot of issues that could come up with less experienced or less professional teams, probably reflected in smaller cities than Salem, I would imagine.
Not always.
Okay, sometimes bigger cities.
Always.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other thing you're saying, though, is that because we have a decentralized system, maybe there's some latent risk that the team manages well from having people kind of throughout the organization bearing the responsibilities within those sort of decentralized units.
Yeah. And the city always needs to be ready for somebody to no longer work with the city. So that means documented processes. I guess I'll just say with this whole FAFATA reporting requirement, let's make sure that that's a documented process now so that it doesn't slip through the cracks again. I mean, things like that. But really having good, solid policies in place, and making sure people are aware of the policies and procedures and where to find them. Very, very important. That doesn't always
Sounds
happen.
like our department does a good job, a very good job. Do some cities show up with like a shoebox?
No, that's my tax clients that do that to me.
Okay, got it.
Well, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate that response. It actually helps me kind of calibrate how to talk to people about it, just in terms of what the value of the audit is, because sometimes, like, I don't know, maybe we're just paying somebody to check boxes, but clearly you've got a lot of experience with different organizations that are in a different place than we are. So that's.
Counselor Tucker, I'd like to comment on one thing you said at the beginning about, you know, should the, I think you're asked the question whether the city should have an in-house auditor, and
Right.
and this, you know, system with a contracted auditor is sort of the norm, and they actually contract with the council, not necessarily the city. He's the council's auditor, and you really want someone independent, separated from the city to provide that audit function.
And just to follow up on that, as the independent auditor for the city, I am not allowed to be part of your internal control process. We've had clients that say, oh, well, that's your job when you come in to verify that. The city needs to have people itself. And I mean, you mentioned a smaller city. They struggle with having enough people to look at everything. Salem obviously is big enough. There are multiple very experienced people that can look at things and review. Sometimes city council has to get involved with some of my smaller cities because that's the only next person up essentially in the process in there. But I currently don't have any clients that have an actual internal auditor. Main reason for that is money. It is not cheap to have an internal auditor on staff to do that. Sometimes there are just, you know, if you want, you know, studies done or something like that of a specific department and go through and see kind of what's working and what's not working, that's something you can contract out, and that's going to be cheaper than having a full-time staff as internal auditors.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yep. Any other questions?
I'm gonna let her just run with it, because I don't know how much
So just real quick, thank you, Ryan, and I want to thank Jeremy. This is the first year in this role for our financial reporting manager. He did a great job with his team, which also experienced quite a few transitions. So the fact that we still have that clean audit coming out of that, even with all the staff transitions, I think speaks to the level of professionalism in the finance department. Thank you, Jeremy.
Good job.
Good job, Jim.
I wouldn't expect my first audit to go that well.
Oh, it's not his first
No.
audit, it's just his first one in charge of everything. How many years, Jeremy?
I think I just passed 17.
It's amazing.
It's a lot of numbers.
So I can't remember the last time the city did not receive a clean audit. It's been a minute, hasn't it?
So just to be clear, the city did receive a clean audit. It's the single audit, the federal grant compliance where there was a finding.
Sure. But historically, I mean, I've sat through these meetings before. We have to do a financial audit is required by law, a city of our size. We have to do one year after year. And these have been, with this tiny exception, we've had pretty successful audits over the last several years, is my memory. Am I mistaken? Yeah, I can't think of the last time we didn't have a clean audit.
I think it's been decades probably.
Beg your pardon?
I think it's been decades probably.
Yeah,
It's really
decades.
bad.
How about that? I think that's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. Well, thank you, folks. So next on our agenda, and thank you, REDW, I appreciate you. Baker Tilly, presentation of performance audit program update and library performance audit.
All right, perfect. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen with you all. Give me one moment. For the record, I'm Tammy Lorschweitzer with Baker Tilly, and then today I also have my colleague Eva with me. Eva, would you want to introduce yourself? for
Yeah,
the committee?
absolutely. I'm a staff at Baker Tilly. It's really nice to see you all, and I'll be taking us through some of the findings on this audit.
Perfect. Before we get into the audit itself, we wanted to do a quick little update on our performance audit program and also talk about next steps with you today. So to date, we've completed 4 performance audits. This reflects 28 different recommendations that have been provided to help support efficient and effective service delivery in each of these areas. When we first started thinking about this program, these were some of the projects that really came to the committee in terms of the high and medium priority projects. In addition, we have 2 performance audits that are currently underway. Parks will be coming to you in April, and then we just got started looking at fire overtime, really with an eye towards understanding how processes could be improved to help reduce those costs. And we anticipate that that audit will be able to come forward to the committee around June. So this is just a reminder of the approved project criteria that we developed as part of this work. So we're focusing on the general fund, we're looking for cost savings, looking at the impact on the city as a whole, and also really thinking through the organizational readiness and staff capacity in order to take on this work, not just the upfront work of interacting with us, getting us documents, reviewing reports, but also thinking through the actual recommendation implementation. As you all have seen, a lot of the recommendations that we provide are not like just change this one thing. They're a lot more involved than that. And so we wanted to just reflect on that as well. So on this slide, we show the listing of projects that were considered high or medium priority when we started this work and have not yet been completed. So we wanted to talk about next steps for the program today with the committee, especially understanding that there have been a lot of recommendations provided to date and acknowledging that those also do take staff resources in order to implement. So we don't want these reports to sit on a shelf, and we do want the recommendations to be able to have the impact that we want to see in the city. So at this point in the program, there is some interest on the part of staff in seeking more implementation support to be able to capitalize on where Baker Tilly may be able to add some staff capacity and helping to make those changes, and then maybe revisiting the program for the next fiscal year. So I wanted to share that, and then I don't know if Krishna or Josh has anything to add to that as we talk about this with the committee today.
Nothing from us.
Okay. Is the committee open to pausing the program to allow us to focus more on recommendation implementation with staff?
I guess I'm trying to read between the lines of what you're saying, Tammy, and see if you need direction from the committee about this. As you were discussing, as I reviewed this last project, the library one, and knowing you have 2 more that are underway right now, it does feel like every time we finish one of these, it's a very useful but a to-do list nonetheless for the city staff. And I think whether you decide to engage with Baker Tilly to like get ahead, try to check off the boxes on the to-do list coming out of these audits, it does feel like they continue to build, and the more we audit, the more recommendations that are going to be forthcoming. And I kind of want to know that the last set of recommendations are being addressed before we drum up more for IT or drum up more for code compliance. There's still things that are coming out of the oven from the last ones, so to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor. So now that Counselor Tigan said something, I do want to add a few comments there. What I would like to look at is right now, no more than 2 audits at the same time, because it has become a lot on the staff to manage these. The other thing to your point, something that we as a team talked about it last week, one is to go through these audits, but the most important piece is to implement the recommendations that were made through these audits. I think that's where the accountability piece is, more than just going through the audit. My preference is to finish implementing those recommendations before we pick up something else, right? And I'm also, with our new service delivery strategy, we want to be very conscious about staff timing and what we can deliver and what we can't. So kind of in alignment with that, I think it's important to take a pause on some of these, but let's finish implementing those recommendations. We might not have time today to talk about it, but today I wanted to close the loop on the leadership team on it. Let's talk about 9 recommendations. What did we implement? What is it we couldn't do? And how do we move forward with them? I think it's the same thing with every other audit that we did. We should be able to come and spend some time on implementing those recommendations. And also, I also talked about getting some help from Baker Tilly if we can't move forward with those recommendations, right? So anyway, we'll put that.
If I may, I also think it could be helpful, before we select the next ones, for this group to consider what other areas you'd like to look at. These were left over from a list that's quite, was developed quite a while ago, so there might be other services items that could be evaluated. So not looking to add right now, but when we come back to you with other priorities, maybe the list would look a little different. And if you have thoughts, make sure you reach out to staff.
So Josh, just to kind of add to that, I guess the question is, are those still the ones that we want to look at, right? We talked about the IT audit. Is that still of interest, or something else should take that place? So I think this committee should have that conversations around where the next priorities.
So is the proposal to finish the 2 that are in progress, fire overtime, and I forgot the other one offhand, parks. And then those close by the end of June, and then we have a season of working through the recommendations of the 6, 7, the 7, the ones that we've had so far.
Yes, and we'll come back at a future meeting to select the next round.
It seems very reasonable to me, and I want us to be mindful of staff bandwidth, and if we have our CFO and our city manager both recommending this approach, that seems very reasonable to me. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I don't know if you're looking for a motion or just like a head nod.
Head nod works great. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
I think that, to me, part of the important thing, though, is that we can continue to communicate to the public the benefit of the program. And the benefit of the program is that the recommendations are addressed and changes, improvements, et cetera, happen, and not that we just continue to keep auditing. So this recommendation seems to capture that too.
Are you going to be reporting to council about the audit of the city manager's office?
Yeah, it was on the schedule. I mean, it was on the agenda for today, but depending on the time, we might have to postpone it, but I am ready to give a presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we are going to be presenting the results of the library performance audit for you today. So we perform this audit because the library is one of the functions that the levy supports, as well as some interest in really understanding how the library was delivering services in the community, engaging the community to understand demand, prioritizing its operations, leveraging community partnerships and volunteers to augment its limited staff capacity, and really understand how it was reaching different areas of the community and telling its story through performance measures and data. So this performance audit evaluated all 4 of those areas, looking at service delivery, looking at community engagement, those partnerships and volunteers, and then performance measures. We followed our normal process for this performance audit. We reviewed documents. We met with city leadership and staff at the library. We also conducted 10 focus groups with community groups, neighborhood associations, advisory board members, folks like that. And we conducted peer benchmarking with 5 different library organizations, which is a slightly different list because of the library and the way that they're structured across the state of Oregon. So We looked at Beaverton, Corvallis Benton, Deschutes, Eugene, and Hillsborough for this audit. We'll have Eva talk about commendations.
Yeah, we actually had quite a few commendations come out of this audit, and we just wanted to take this minute to extend our gratitude to city staff. I see Bridget on the call for their active engagement. Their participation in the audit was extremely valuable, and they had many areas of strength and existing good practices. We're just noting 4 of them here: our committed leadership, really proactive community engagement, effective collection management, and most importantly to us, focus on continuous improvement. The next thing I want to talk about is a little background, which I hope gives a little context for how to interpret the findings in the report. So just as a reminder, given the levy approval, city leadership requested that we do this performance audit in order to evaluate the library's cost effectiveness for delivering equitable, impactful, community responsive services. So while the levy did provide critical maintenance funding following prior budget shortfalls, it is temporary. And that lack of permanent funding mechanisms really impacts the library's ability to maintain adequate staffing and meet evolving community needs. So we do think that this report should be read and understood within that context of limited staffing and resources. We don't make recommendations around staffing because of that funding constraint, but we do want to look at resource allocation given the current staffing levels to maximize effectiveness within it. Great, thank you. So our main findings fall into about 3 themes. The first one is really about decision-making, which is the lens that we're going to view resource allocation, partnerships, community engagement, and library hours through. Resource allocation is really critical to library management, particularly because libraries frequently operate with limited resources. So because of this, libraries really need to know how to prioritize activities in a way that aligns with community needs and the library's overall strategic objectives. The library is actually doing a ton in this regard. They've established a 5-year strategic plan in 2022. They have goals for individual decisions or divisions like youth services, and they have a points-based prioritization tool that helps them compare between different programs. What we think they would benefit from is taking all of those existing pieces and combining them into a single holistic decision-making framework so that they can compare decisions across not just program to program, but programs, hours, and staffing. So for instance, we found that Salem has limited branch hours and locations compared to their peers. So we would want to be able to make decisions around the trade-offs between expanding hours, supporting programs, or pursuing alternative outreach options, all of which pull from those really limited resource pool. We also wanted to include a more systematic approach to partnerships and strategy around community engagement. The library already maintains a wide array of community partnerships and mobile outreach services. So this is just about taking those pieces and building towards bigger picture goals like equity and access. In our management response, we heard a lot about the fact that this can be a bit burdensome given the limited staffing we talked about. So one of the things we wanted to say is that we can phase this in, and this can be implemented in phases. That's all for this theme. I'm going to move to the next one. So the next one, I'm kind of grouping themes around staffing and around volunteer management. So it's going to look at staff roles and responsibilities and volunteer management practices. I just want to give you a little bit of context. Historically, the library had a traditional approach to assigning staff roles and responsibilities. So that means clear distinctions between public-facing and operational support roles. Then, due to budget pressures and unfilled vacancies, the library shifted towards a model where all staff, regardless of their primary role, share responsibility for service desk coverage. While we understand this kind of triage approach, we did hear that supervisors and managers are often juggling multiple roles and have high workloads. So we're recommending that the library work with HR to review whether it would be possible to incorporate some of those supervisory roles into their senior librarian role to better balance workloads, which is common with other libraries and would dedicate more time for specialized work. We also looked at volunteer management. So we found that the library's volunteer program does use fewer volunteer hours than other peers. Even omitting one outlier peer, the average peer uses in the 7,000 range of volunteer hours, which is over 1,500 hours more than Salem's reported 5,666 volunteer hours. We found that this was largely caused by the absence of a dedicated volunteer coordinator. So 4 out of the 5 peers have dedicated staff managing volunteer programs. We know that asking even, 0.5 of an FTE during a staffing crunch is really difficult. But we do think that not having a volunteer coordinator that is a dedicated role impacts how many hours volunteers can engage, because those coordinator roles support the ability to recruit, retain, and manage volunteers. So we do recommend considering adding that position along with expanding volunteer roles and tracking. We just have one more finding theme, and that is around performance measures. So like many other libraries nationwide, the library's current performance measures are primarily focused on operational metrics. So it's going to be super high level, like number of monthly visitors, cardholder programs, etc. And the library is also, on top of that, tracking additional usage statistics that are measured in its internal reports. So it's kind of mid-level, like program attendance by age, circulation by location. And while we understand that performance metrics take time to collect and interpret, and staffing and resource limitations have prevented the library's ability to expand performance measurement, we did take a look at best practices in this area. And what we found was that additional performance measures could enhance the library's understanding of its effectiveness. And that would just better align with their services and with community needs, which is the real goal of all of our operations, right? So performance metrics like the ones that we have listed in the bullet points of this recommendation would really do 2 things. They would help standardize satisfaction measures, but secondly, and very importantly, they would also improve transparency and justify continued public trust, support, and investment. That is what we have for you today on these themes. I know I ran through that quite quickly in the interest of time, and you can imagine from a 40-page report, there is a little bit more detail that we could go into. So I just want to pause and see if anyone has any questions.
Thank you. Questions? If there are no immediate questions, I see we have our librarian connected by Zoom. Bridget, do you want to offer any comments or reflections on the audit with us?
Not at this time. I think the audit kind of grasped all the things that I think it grasps that we're providing reliable public service, and comparing to our peers, the open hours versus the staffing, we're pretty much on point. We just need to formalize our processes and some of our statistics to kind of better show a picture of all the things that we're doing and be more consistent in our practices. But I think just more formalization is needed. Right now, we have a lot of ad hoc processes that we haven't had time to write down, but that is something that this audit kind of made more clear that is needed.
Thank you. I had a question. They mentioned having more demographics type data. I'm always curious to know how our young people are using our library. I know we have literacy programs in English and Spanish for our very young readers. I'm just curious, what kind of metrics do we already track for teens or other, basically, ages 0 to, 21, 24, to know what services or library resources are most needed by our teenagers or other young people?
We track our programs by age groups. So we have 0 to 5, then elementary, teen, preteen, as well as adults and seniors. So we already have stats that we can show comparing all of the programs and who attends and how many of those type of programs we have consistently throughout the month.
Okay, so I'm just kind of curious then, since we're already tracking that, maybe this is more a question for Baker Tilly, what more information, when you say we need more demographics type data tracking. Can you give me some examples of some things we're not currently tracking that you think would be useful to track?
Sure. So we have some examples included within the report on page 27. So it's also looking at things like zip code in terms of where are these individuals and what is the access that they're having to the library. So one of the key themes is, you have 2 branches. Staffing is limited. You do need a certain number of FTE per hour to be open to the public in the buildings that you have. And because of that, there's other parts of the community that might have a more difficult time accessing the library, just from a geo perspective. And so that's one of the areas where you could look at some different data to see, okay, are we reaching people from these different neighborhoods and how are they interacting with the library?
Okay. Anyone else have questions for the library audit?
Is game night back? Bridget, is game night back for the teens?
For adults, it has been. For teens, they have different other programs that they're interested in. We currently have the teen scene with a bunch of games that they do play every day when they're here.
Thank you.
I'm curious either from Bridget or from Baker Tilly, as part of the passage of the levy, we've established a community oversight board. And I know we've had maybe one meeting, but I'm curious from either party if you envision a way to have that oversight element from the community improve what they perceive as the outcomes from passing the levy. Is there room for that in your recommendations, or Bridget, if you're thinking about it in a certain way, considering what you've heard from Baker Tilly?
So far from what I've heard from our committee members and the oversight is that they want to see how the library is being used now with the extended hours versus the prior use. So I was able to get some stats for our usage beginning in mid-November when we increased the hours in comparison to the last couple of Novembers before, and we have been seeing an increase of use. And we're starting to see peak hours and peak days that were different from before. So I have been trying to compile all of that. But if any other information or stats that I can provide, I'd be happy to see what I can find.
All right, well, I want to be mindful of the time. It's 5:01. Do we have time for the enterprise leadership performance audit update?
So that's actually from Krishna. Krishna, should we wait till next month for that one?
Yeah, I think we should, because it was quite good.
All right, there is no continued business. Is there any new business? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.